Broncos country, I have a very interesting video today. I know that a lot of us have talked about Pat Bryant eventually maybe being the heir apparent to Cortland Sutton whenever his time here in Denver wraps up. But what if I said there are some similarities to Pat Bryant with star NFL receiver Puka Nacua? Yeah. We're going to dive into what those similarities are with him coming out of BYU, with Pat Bryant coming out of Illinois, and how there might be a little bit more similarities to their game than maybe what meets the eye. So if you like this, please be sure to engage me in the comments, smash that like and subscribe as well if you haven't done that already. Let's go ahead and get into it, guys. So this first part that I'm going to share with you, it's from Reception Perception. Great website, really cool stuff. I subscribe to them because of your channel or because of your support of the channel. I'm able to do this stuff, but they sampled only 3 games, okay, with Pat Bryant. I'm going to read through this. We'll take a look at the charts and then also compare a little bit with the work that they've done on Puka Nacua. Now, Pat Bryant. Pat is set to enter the NFL, so this was before the draft, after a 4-year career at the University of Illinois. He brings solid size to the table, 6'2", 204 pounds, and scored 17 touchdowns combined over his final 2 seasons. Bryant primarily was a perimeter option in college, taking 68.4% of his sample snaps outside. Remember, this is a 3-game sample. 66.1% coming as the right wide receiver spot. He took just 4 snaps in 3 games on the left side. However, he did take 31.6 of his snaps in the slot or backfield. My instincts tell me that if he's going to make a significant impact in the league, it will likely be in a role that leans more towards moving around the formation than being a strict outside wide receiver. So I think that means he could be similar to what we saw with Troy Franklin at certain parts of the year. You know, he was that Z wide receiver. He would do a lot of pre-snap motion, move across the formation. Marvin Mims did a little bit of that as well. Very interesting. Now, when we take a look at this chart, before we dive into the rest of this, the stuff on the left side is success by route. How many times did he run these routes successfully? You can see a lot of NFL type routes he ran successfully. The dig route, very, very important in this offense. The curl, also very important. The comeback, the corner, all these routes, I mean, you want to be running them well. He still had decent success on the post route, 66.7. 9 route, only 27.8%. Doesn't necessarily have that long speed. But I think he ran that fairly successfully. And when you take account his quarterback, Altmaier, which did not have a lot of deep ball accuracy, I think that, that might have handicapped some of these statistics as well. Did not run the slant super successfully. That's kind of eye-popping when you hear the comparisons Sean Payton's making towards Pat Bryant or Michael Thomas, but there's hope, and I'll get to that. Then on the right, you got the route percentage. How often did they run these routes? You see the highest routes that he ran, 18.6 slant, dig 16.5, 9 route 18.6, corner route 6.2. But to me, the biggest thing, and curl route 15.5. To me, the biggest thing is that he's running the dig route a lot. He's running the slant, and he's running that corner. That's great. Big routes in this offense. Now, especially as a red zone threat, you got to run those corner routes well. 50% success rate versus man coverage. Okay. That's fine. 77% essentially success rate versus zone. Very, very good. 40% success rate versus press coverage. Needs to get better at that. Remember, guys, this is a 3-game sample size. With a near 77% success rate versus zone coverage, Bryant was much better at beating zone than man, relatively speaking. His 4.6 40-yard dash time does, unfortunately, show up when he's trying to run away from cornerbacks and man coverage. He does demonstrate a solid ability to sift through trash on intermediate routes and is usually in the right place within the flow of a play. Bryant's route chart shows a player who likely won't be a vertical threat in the NFL. His 27.8% success rate on 9 routes indicates his lack of long speed and has issues stacking corners and man coverage. His 55.6% success rate on slants is also brutal. You see a ton of plays where Bryant gets stuck on press coverage at the line of scrimmage when he's the farthest boundary receiver. For all of these reasons, I just don't think he can be a full-time X receiver in the NFL. However, Bryant's success rate on base routes like the curl and dig were strong while running both at relatively high volume. He has a great sense of working back to the quarterback on curls and crossing zone defenders' faces to flash open on digs and crossers. The latter routes can also become a strength of his game because he's pretty nifty after the catch despite his lack of speed. He was in space on 78.6 of his catches in this sample and went down on first contact on just 36.4% while breaking multiple tackles on 27.3%. Wow. Overall, listen to this, guys. Bryant reminded me a little bit of former Broncos and current Lions receiver Tim Patrick, with a little bit more power and quickness after the catch. He would fit well in an offense that utilizes bigger receivers as the flanker / slot receiver and wants to throw in the intermediate area. In the right spot, he could return value as a day 3 pick. Very interesting. Big takeaway there. Now, when we take a look at Puka Nacua's profile here, and again, shout out to Matthew Harmon, Reception Perception. They did a 3-game mini set on Puka Nacua when he was coming out of BYU. Now, remember, BYU was essentially playing a G5 Mountain West schedule before they joined the Big 12 in 2023. Jaron Hall, I believe, was the quarterback. Now, there are some similarities to this game. I'm not going to read through the full article here, but Nacua has good size, 6'2", 201 pounds, and may project as a big slot or flanker in the NFL. However, there are certain parts of his game that make me think he could handle some X receiver reps in the pros. Kind of worded differently, could play some X. He'd said that maybe Pat Bryant wouldn't be a full-time X, but could play it. But take a look at the different routes here in comparison to Pat Bryant. You know, the dig route is something that really sticks out. Ran a lot of digs, ran a lot of slants, ran a lot of outs. That's probably the biggest difference, is that he ran a lot of these out routes at BYU, but still ran quite a bit of 9 routes as well. But he was most successful on the curls, slants at 77%. So still not like amazing, but better than Pat Bryant. I would also say he's also facing weaker competition. The post route didn't have a ton of success there, but still 66.7 at the dig. That's interesting. 50% at the 9 route, but killed it on the corner routes 100% and out routes at 75. Now, when we contrast this with Pat Bryant, again, remember, these are 3-game sample sizes. Wasn't nearly as successful at the out route, but killed it with the comebacks in the corners and had a better rate with the digs, 75% compared to 66% for Puka Nacua. Now let's get back to it. Biggest difference, 74.2% success rate versus man coverage. Pat Bryant's was 50. 78.8 success rate versus zone coverage. Very good. Pat Bryant was just a notch lower at 77%. And then 73.3% success rate versus press coverage. That was way better than what Pat Bryant had. He had 40%. But remember, Pat Bryant's playing in the Big Ten. So I think that there's a little bit of wiggle room. None of this is perfect data. Remember, it's a 3-game sample set. But talked about how He performed really well as a man beater in this sample. He struggles to blow past and stack defenders on deep routes, just like what was said about Pat Bryant. He's a detailed player in the short to intermediate game, great off the line. Nacua's 73.3% success rate versus press is extremely encouraging. He can win off the line and get open. He might not be a vertical player outside, but he could end up being a reliable possession target. I came away really encouraged by his hands. Nacua dropped just one pass in this 3-game sample and won 5 of his 6 contested targets. We'll get into that later. And yeah, he went down on first contact on just over 55% of his in-space attempts and broke multiple tackles on 10%. Interesting. Now listen to this. Overall, Nacua is a rugged player who's reliable when on the field and projects as a solid route runner, especially in the short game. I could see him sticking on an NFL roster and ultimately cracking into a rotation. He has some upside as a day 3 pick to eventually return targets and become a trusted outlet receiver. Now, I think he was taken in like the 5th or 6th round. Obviously, he would have gone day 1. Yeah, in a redraft right now. But I find this interesting with how he was used his rookie year with the Rams. You can see ton of dig routes, ton of success at the dig routes, the curl routes. He became much more successful with running the slants and the posts, even though he didn't really run much of them, 5.2%. Ran, a ton of 9 routes. And was about a 50% success guy there, which is probably a little bit better than what we would see with Pat Bryant. But to me, the biggest thing is seeing what he did with these routes over here. And Pat Bryant ran a ton of these routes in college and had success with them. As you can see, he ran a lot of the digs, the curls, and slants. I think Pat Bryant showed at the Senior Bowl he can get off of press coverage, but he's going to have to improve at that in order to get much better and have a success like this with the slant routes. Now, playing a big slot, that could really help him do that rather than playing as like a traditional X wide receiver. Now, some interesting college stuff that I did want to talk about too was this is thanks to Sports Info Solutions. All this data is free, so you can go check that out. But look at the bottom here. Puka Nacua ranked 12th in his draft year when it came to broken and missed tackles forced for every reception at 0.27. That was 12th in his draft class. When you look at what Pat Bryant did at University of Illinois, he shows a little bit more power than maybe what Puka showed. In his draft class, ranked 7th with 0.33 broken and missed tackles per reception. So you just need to get him in space. Find that very interesting. Now, also, when you take a look at EPA per target, he was at 0.56, 7th in his draft class again. Oh, sorry, I didn't show this. Let me go back. So you can see Pat Bryant's route running right here, or broken and missed tackles forced per reception at 7th. Then when you go to EPA per target, you can see Pat Bryant was still at 7th with 0.56. We go back to Puka Nacua's draft year. Let's take a look here. Where was he at? A little bit lower. Man, there's some high EPAs per target. But right here at 15th at 0.32. So not necessarily on par with Pat Bryant, right? But I do find this interesting that ultimately it was a substantial gain in EPA when Pat Bryant was involved, just targeted. It was a massive win if Illinois could just target him, and even at a higher rate than Puka Nacua. But lastly, what I want to get to is just some other comparables with their draft profiles. drop rate you see here. They talked about hands, Puka Nacua's hands. I think Pat Bryant has even better hands than Puka Nacua. His drop rate in college this past year was 1.8%. Puka Nacua's coming out was at 5.9. The contested catch rate for Puka was 50%. Again, facing a G5 level defense for the most part, while Pat Bryant's was at 69.2 in the Big Ten. Yards per route run, a little bit lower. Puka Nacua is around 3.3, I believe, whereas Pat Bryant was 2.83. But again, I think that, those routes, or he was at a 3.53. But again, when we go back to just the routes that they were running, Puka was running and having much more success on those 9 routes than and post routes than what Pat Bryant was having. Now, I think physically they also compare to each other. You can see Pat Bryant ran a 4.6140, but they both ran the same 10-yard split at 1.62. This should be a good indicator that, especially with Pat Bryant testing so much better in the explosion categories, as we can see right here, that in my opinion, if he's coached up correctly, he should have no issue getting off man coverage in the NFL. He had a 37.5 broad jump. That's insane. Puka Nacua, 33. Puka Nacua had a 10-foot, 1-inch broad jump or vertical. Pat Bryant had a 37-inch vertical broad jump. He had a 10.04. You can see here, Puka Nacua's broad jump was 10.01, vertical 33. Puka does have slightly larger hands, like a 1/10 of an inch long, bigger hands, and 1 inch, slightly less than 1 inch more on the arms. But yeah, 5.17 RAS for Puka Nacua. Pat Bryant, 7.08. This is a little bit incomplete because he didn't do the agility testing, but the explosion stuff is very, very, I think, a great indicator that he does have the ability to get off press coverage. And I think Sean Payton sees that in his game. At least I see it when I look at what Pat Bryant's able to do. So, am I saying that Pat Bryant is going to become a generational wide receiver? No, I'm not saying that. But I do believe he has some qualities in his game to where it's not going to surprise me if he's starting most of the year for the Broncos right now. And Cecil and Mace were saying that a little bit on their Orange and Blue Today podcast yesterday. I think that he should be able to return some value his rookie year in that Z position, which I find very interesting. So the biggest thing is, how is he going to do against press? Can he run those slant routes successfully from the slot? Again, Puka was a little bit better at running those in college, just in general. But you saw his success rate went way up once he got into the Sean McVay offense. I think something similar can happen with Pat Bryant in the Sean Payton offense as well. Again, I think there are some similarities to their game and how they were talked about, what their drawbacks are. Of course, Puka has a little bit better long speed, which is probably the difference in him being like an elite receiver. I don't know if Pat Bryant's ever going to be an elite NFL receiver, but I think he can return value for a 3rd-round pick. And I think that he can be a sneaky regret from some of these NFL teams for passing on him. I'm going to say that. So y'all let me know your thoughts in the comments. What'd you think of this comparison? I know the data isn't perfect, but I thought that it was pretty interesting. So thank you so much. Go Broncos.